make sure you've got a team around you that is supportive and is constructive and positive, and also have good leadership qualities. Being a leader doesn't mean you're in charge. Being a leader means you know how to handle situations yourself. You've got good problem solving and understanding and empathy and all these other great characteristics. So just make sure you've got a good team around you that can support you. Because again, knowing that you need to do the right thing isn't easy. And it oftentimes would benefit from meaningful input and feedback.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rob Ocel, the VP of Innovation at This.Labs, here for another episode in our series about engineering leadership. Today, I am here with Dr. Mike Saylor, who is the CEO at Blackswan Cybersecurity and a professor of cybersecurity at UT San Antonio. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we like to do is give people a chance to just kind of introduce themselves a little bit. Can you explain how you arrive at becoming the CEO of Blackswan? Like, what was your journey to get to that point?
Oh man, no one else would let me work for them. No.
Well, that's as good a reason as anything.
So I've been in cyber and IT for a long time. I've had just about every role you can think of, from running cable and fixing computers all the way up to even on the physical security side. I was an executive bodyguard, did risk planning for international trips, that kind of thing. And at some point, you've learned all you think you can learn. Really, everything else is just more stories about something that happened. It's not really another feather in your cap or arrow in your quiver type of thing. While at the same time, always been being kind of entrepreneurial. I started my first computer company right out of high school, cleaning keyboards and teaching people how to use Microsoft Office. And then from there, a guy from high school said, let's start a computer store. So he knew where to buy stuff, and I had clients and had a bit of a business sense about me. So we started a retail wholesale computer store. From that, and all the while transitioning back and forth between my own company and corporate jobs. And then at some point you're tired of the corporate politics and the grind, and if you've got that entrepreneurial spirit and you understand the risk and you're willing to work with your family on that, then you do what I did, and I just decided to start my own company. And so that was my first like large cyber company was about 14 years ago. While also doing other stuff, like I've been a professor for 24 years, so teaching at night or fitting that in, and just continuing to. So even though I think I felt like I've learned a lot in IT and cyber, I still had to continue to grow on what it means to build and run a business, which I'm still learning things there, several decades into that. But and then being around people that support you and share a common vision and goals and willing to work together. So that's kind of where.
It's kind of funny that you said that one of your first things that you've done out of high school was making your own computer company, like helping people set things up. It was the same thing for my family. Yeah. We were really big on like helping people clean out their towers and like upgrade their equipment and install their new software. My dad used to have me installing the discs for him, and like I realized that that's kind of a job that's hard to come by these days because everyone's doing everything on their phones and the systems are so closed off these days. People don't do a lot of like modular one-off upgrades and things of that nature. So it's like a starter tech job that just sort of missing from the ecosystem. I'm kind of sad, like I have a son growing up, but I'm like, oh, like you won't be able to have that way to make like some easy money.
Well, you can always build a lab for him to gain that valuable experience of our humble beginnings.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I'll brush off the old diskette. I remember installing Windows 95 on like 20 disks, and that was my job. Is I had to do my homework, and then when it said to put the next one in, it was my job to put the next one in. Yeah, really roughing it back then. Well, listen, one of the things that we were talking about that we want to talk with you about is just this idea of growing businesses. I mean, obviously a challenge that every business has. You're talking about your streak of being entrepreneurial. And, one of the biggest problems we have is, of course, finding people to buy what it is we're selling. And so
Right.
I was just kind of curious if you could maybe get us started by just sort of explaining what that challenge has been like, I guess, for you specifically as a business person, as you've kind of pursued your entrepreneurial goals.
Sure. And there's lots of things to say about that from lots of different angles. Fortunate for us, everybody needs cybersecurity. There's nothing we do today as a business that someone's going to go, yeah, I don't need that. Or an educated person wouldn't say that. I think there's some ignorance out there about the value of investing in cyber, but cyber is a part of almost everything now. It's how you configure your computer. It's the antivirus. It's the settings on your smartphone. It's so many things. So finding an opportunity to talk about what we do is really the biggest challenge. Everybody wants to talk to us, but how do we find how do we negotiate the time or the opportunity to get in front of people? And so for us and my experience with Black Swan, but also prior organizations, building a reputation for focusing on the solution, not necessarily, what this box of goods that you've got or this defined service. It's more about having the conversation. So that's good. So we've got a good reputation for that. So reputation's one. The other one is just the generating the activity, the interest. So there's social media where you can put these your brand and your message out there, but then you're limited to some degree by who receives that, who has eyes on that stuff. All right. Well, then there's events and marketing and conferences, and there's only so many of me or us to go to so many of those. So you're still limited. It's still not as one to many as you'd like. So then there's the sales function. So how do we get someone that's educated in everything we know and can express and really portray our values and our approach, and go out into the world and make phone calls and knock on doors and generate leads and get us and get the right people involved in the conversation. And then there's the partner model where whether that's your organization's focus, and some organizations really do well at just having partners that sell what they do or refer business to them. And that can be very effective, especially if they've got a defined, established, mature sales function where you're just educating them on what you do and providing them the materials and the pricing and that kind of thing, and the incentive. Well, for us, it was a mix of all those things at different times and different proportions. I think back to your question is you've really got to look at your business and what you're selling and the model that's appropriate for you at that time, realizing too that over time that model may need to shift, that mix of sales and partner and conferences and events or trainings or what have you.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like it's like, especially because I know it can be the case. Some business owners might feel like once I have the customer, they're mine. Like I can maintain that relationship, I can keep that customer happy, I can get recurring business from them or whatever it is. But like they just don't know I exist, right? I see the people that they're transacting with now, as opposed to me, and I cannot believe that's who they're with, right? Like, and for my dad who ran a mail order medical supply company, I remember how important it was for him when every couple months or every quarter or whatever it was when they sent out their new catalogs. And it's like those first couple weeks after that catalog went out, that's when like so much of their sales were happening, because it landed on somebody's desk, they flipped through it, saw a few things and said, yeah, I'll give it a shot, right? And it's like, we don't have that. I mean, you'd think with the internet we would have nothing but that, but it's almost, there are so many things competing for our attention as consumers. It's really hard to penetrate that attention.
You're right. And along those lines too, depending on your mix of partners and direct sales and business development, You may have opportunities to reach out to clients, or it may be limited. So, for example, if you get a client through a partner, who owns that relationship? Is it your partner? And do you have the ability to reach out to that client and talk about other opportunities, or how are we doing? Or so you may be constrained there. Well, then in any case, whether you're able to do that with a partner related client or your own direct related client, you still have to have the discipline to reach out to those clients and ask how things are going. Is there anything else we can do for you? That's true business development client relationship. And that takes time and discipline. And so for us, as an example, we started Black Swan focusing primarily on the partner model, along with the social media and the events and speaking and the relationship that we kind of brought to the table. But doing that plus running and building the company, we were not disciplined, and probably aren't as disciplined as we should be today still in that business development client relationship focus. We just assume everything's going well because we haven't heard otherwise. But at the same time, I'm certain I would feel positive if I was a client that the service providers, especially the leadership team, is reaching out to me on a periodic basis. And so we, as an example, need to get better at that part. But definitely limitations and constraints and benefits and pros and cons to all the different approaches to sales and business development.
Yeah, along those lines, the different approaches, like the partner models, there's a lot of different versions that I've been a part of too. And it really, sometimes it even depends on which side you're on. If you're the product provider, or you're maybe the service partner, or maybe you're both service partners, right? These are all different models, that subcontracting model, or, sometimes you can have that symbiotic relationship, but sometimes you can have, it's set up where they're fronting you. They're basically doing the sales largely for you, and you're pretty invisible, like you said. Then it's a question of whether you can pierce around that or not. I guess, can you go in a little bit more about maybe some of the different models you've tried, especially like if there's ones that you think were better for different stages of your company, or if you're like, hey, this would be good for another company, but this wasn't a good fit for our services company or our security company, like just to help people who are like maybe considering starting this partner model, giving them some heads up on kind of what they might want to try.
Certainly. And one of the things that I'll stress is that it's important to make sure that your partner relationship is not just one directional. Shy away from anything that requires some kind of exclusivity, and just truly understand the value of the relationship, both to you and to your partner. And so I think to your point, Rob, there are a couple of different types of partners, and I'm sure there's more than I'll bring up. But the ones that we have kind of vendor partner. So our service may rely on a technology, and so the partner that provides that technology, or maybe if it's another service, making sure that that's a bidirectional relationship where we're getting a benefit from them for selling their product. They're benefiting from the sale of that product, but does it end there? Is there some co-branding, co-marketing? Is there referral work? We're out, selling and promoting their brand of this product, and well, yeah, sure, it helps us in delivering a service and making some margin there. But they should also recognize that we are expanding their footprint and their brand recognition too. So figuring out the best mix there. We have several partners that have marketing dollars for us based on a percentage of what we sell or what we use. We have partners that co-brand. We do thought leadership. We do we co-present at events, and they refer business to us so that we can sell more of what they do. So that's a pretty good relationship. We have other partners that are focused on helping us find new opportunities. So they're really just the sales function. So it's a complementary service, or a complementary organization. They, maybe they sell cabling and how to build data centers. Well, then they're salespeople who have, some fundamental technical knowledge, aren't too far from being able to talk about cyber risk and are there ways that that these other services that Black Swan would provide to this partner could benefit or add value, and then having a conversation as part of that partnership team with that client. That particular scenario would typically be some kind of subcontract where Black Swan subcontracting to a partner. Well, that lends itself to some kind of hit to your margin, possibly restricting you from talking directly to that client about other things, and then the economics of it. So usually when you're subcontracted, you don't get paid till they get paid, and so and you've got no control over their account receivable or accounting process. So you're kind of at the mercy of that timeline. And we've felt the pain of that scenario several times. So there's that. Well, then there's the referral business, having partners that find you opportunities and just refer it to you, and you're paying them, or they're benefiting somehow. Maybe it's bartering for service, or you're paying them a referral fee. But even in those situations, you've got to make sure that your partner agreement defines who owns that client, and is there any exclusivity or other issues that would restrict you from working with that client. But then, at the end of the day, that's a hit to your margin again.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, so that's a couple of the partner models. There's others. But I think the important thing to consider is why would you need a partner? What's the best type of relationship and some of the attributes therein to establish, so that you're not restricting yourself or hurting yourself. And then the last thing I'll say about that is, in our case, having a good partner that generated a lot of business for us, got the top line revenue up, but again, the bottom line margin was still fairly low because of this partner relationship. Well, over time, we became complacent with the partner bringing us all these deals, and at some point, coming to the realization that our bottom line is not growing the way it should, and
Right.
We didn't plan for, we didn't have a roadmap for moving or for being less reliant on partners and building our own internal direct sales. Which for us was important. Other organizations may be fine focusing on partner model, but we needed to have a better mix.
I like that idea of diversification. I want to come back to it in just a second, but one thing that you said that really sort of struck me was thinking of partnerships with other companies, not just as like them providing business and revenue to you, right? But to understand the mechanism by which they're doing it, right? Because we sort of chatted before this call a little bit about like people that do drop shipping, and you can have whatever opinions you want about people that do drop shipping, but one thing that they're offering is kind of like top of funnel sales as a service. I mean, it's not a direct relationship with you, it's a bit parasitic in that way, but that's what they have an expertise in, is getting people into the top of the funnel. And so it's like, if you're the type of company that's the assist you need, then maybe those are the partners you want. And maybe you want to shy away from the types of partners who are owning the entire funnel. And you want to maybe provide a good way for, like, say, hey, our quality is phenomenal, so we want to partner with somebody who wants to level up their offering by adding us as an add-on to their sales offering. And so I love that idea of just knowing yourself, both as individuals that make up a leadership team, but also just as an organization, and using that to set a partner strategy. Is that kind of how you all think about it now?
Completely agree. So the partners that we have now that have really helped us grow and continue to work with, we've known for eight or more years. So getting to know them out of the gate was a little slow. You don't really know people until you experience conflict with them, and so conflict is often contract negotiation or follow-ups or scoping, and so that collaborative process tends to lend itself to understanding people better. The partners that we have today, we learned about each other. We dated for a while, and we decided to stick it out. So the partners we have today are kind of tried and true, and we're able to have open discussions with them about this, that, or the other. And so when you think about margin and pricing and value, those are discussions you need to have with your partners as soon as possible. Because if for example they sell a widget and what you provide could help them sell more widgets, but they're making good margin on their widget, your ancillary beneficial widgets are just mailbox money for them, and you get in the way of the strategy of them selling their high margin widget, then that's going to develop some animosity and some contention there, just as an example. Well, then that partnership is diminished. The value there is diminished to some degree, because now you've come to the realization that they don't care about what you're selling. They want to sell more of what they're selling, and your solution just adds to the conversation in the event that what they're selling is delayed, or whatever the case might be. The value is not as apparent. So it's kind of like back in the day when you would buy insurance for your company, and you're like, well, your principals are kind of higher than the others, and they go, well, I'll throw cyber insurance in for free. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or some reduced ridiculous cost. So just be aware that sometimes your partner has their own priorities, and you may not always be top of mind. And that lends itself to that bidirectional relationship, so that you can talk about that.
Yeah, that's it, right? You just want to make those relationships where they're as happy to bring you along. They're not doing it as a favor, right? I mean, maybe they'll do it for a fee, but like, you don't necessarily want it as a favor. You were talking about, like, if you're really good at closing, then you want to make a partner who's going to be putting a lot of stuff at the top of your funnel so that you can close. But at the same time, you might want to offer them that your product will help them close their deals. Like, you're offering your closing as a service. Like, I love that idea of finding those synergies, which, like you said, is going to take time, because you're going to go through many partners and go, yeah, this one didn't quite, it kind of hit, but at a little weird angle, but this one really worked out. Like, I love that idea that the good partner programs are really just about trying this out, seeing if there's that good fit, and then just kind of holding on to the ones that do have that match for you.
Agreed.
But then, like you said, though, it can be really easy sometimes, because this is a bit of sugar, right? You sort of like get that quick burst of growth. You have access to maybe customers or opportunities you didn't have access to, or revenue you didn't have access to before. And it can be sort of tempting to just continue to reinvest into that pipeline. And you wake up one day and you realize like 70, 80% of your revenue is coming through one partnership. And suddenly you don't sleep so good anymore. So talk to me a little bit about like how you are monitoring that, and are there thresholds that you're using to know when the partner stuff is getting too out of whack, or like are there how do you hedge your bets? Like, what are you guys doing to reduce that risk in partner programs as those relationships kind of really deepen?
Sure. And I'll say some of that we've learned over time as we've interacted with mentors and investors and banks. So just as an example, if you go for a line of credit, they want to know about your balance sheet and your sales, and if you borrow money from them, what's are there risks to paying it back? So they look at those types of things. If you ever, so we have different classes of stock. And so when employees want to buy stock, or we want to value shares or what have you, you've got to get a valuation of your company. And that valuation will also look at your proportional makeup of clients. Well, if you're selling through a partner, you're subcontracting through a partner, you could have 30 end clients, but really that partner is that one client. So all that revenue is coming through one contract vehicle. And so when your valuation or your investor or whoever it is looks at your client makeup, they see one client. You're delivering it to 30 end users, but that's one client. And so sure, that's a huge risk. That company could be acquired. They could decide to stop doing business. They could get sued. A cultural change that disrupts the client satisfaction, and all of that business can be impacted by that. So absolutely a risk, in several different ways. Well, then when you start looking at at margin, your partner margin is always less than what you would get if you sold direct.
Sure.
Well, in some cases, maybe if you don't have a good relationship with that partner, they could be threatened by you building your own sales, because now you're not as focused on them. And so that's something to be conscious of also, and be able to manage. So have open conversations with everybody, that, all the stakeholders, to make sure everybody's on the same page and lined up. And then kind of lastly, managing partners that do account for the majority of your revenue, or a good chunk of it, should be, you should be able to go back to those partners and talk about the value and the investment you've made in them. And, if they're a good partner, that'll be a good conversation. If they're too focused on what they're selling and not your growth, then that might be a good indication that there needs to be a change.
Yeah, that's always tricky, right? Exactly, right? Especially when those partner relationships start to become a sizable amount of your revenue, it can be very difficult to understand what the right move is, because you're right? You start to diversify, then all of a sudden you risk that channel. And, if something grows to being too big to fail, that's just a real crisis of leadership moment, like that. You're just uncertain about what to do. That's probably takes a lot of courage to decide that next step.
Well, courage, and sometimes courage comes out of necessity. And, if you're a true leader and you feel responsible for your organization and the people that work there, then you're always looking, at least intending to do the right thing.
Yep,
and that's not always easy. And so the other thing I'll offer in that regard is to make sure you've got a team around you that is supportive and is constructive and positive, and also have good leadership qualities. Being a leader doesn't mean you're in charge. Being a leader means you know how to handle situations yourself. You've got good problem solving and understanding and empathy and all these other great characteristics. So just make sure you've got a good team around you that can support you. Because again, knowing that you need to do the right thing isn't easy. And it oftentimes would benefit from meaningful input and feedback. So
yeah. Hey, sometimes it's not about knowing what the right thing is. Sometimes it's just being the one that's willing to throw the switch and deal with what happens.
Right. Schedule the call. Let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful. Well, listen, we're coming down to the end here. Can you let people know where they might be able to find you online or your company in case they want to find out more?
Certainly. Blackswan Cybersecurity.com. We're also on all the social media platforms. You can find me on LinkedIn primarily. I've got a Twitter account, Professor Saylor. 855-BLK Swan is our phone number. And then there's tons of contact us and set up a time to talk to Mike kind of buttons on our website.
Wonderful. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you so much to Dr. Saylor for being our guest, and thanks to each of you for listening. Hope to see you all next time. As we close out, we'd like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, who would like me to remind you that sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. Thanks, everybody. Hope to see you next time.